Hi, and welcome to This Property Life, the podcast brought to you by Property Wealth System. At This Property Life, we try and give you insights into the real world of property investors, the good, the bad, and the ugly, warts and all. It's not all cupcakes and rainbows out there. We bring you stories and interviews with people in property that help and inspire our listeners to get started or to keep going amongst all the noise. I'm Nick Claydon, and today I'm delighted to be joined by my partner in life and all things property, Caroline Claydon. And we are going to discuss whether the investing classic book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki is still relevant in today's market and today's world. So welcome, Caroline. Great to have another episode with the two of us.
Yes, that sounded very cheesy when you said how delighted you were to have me on.
Genuinely
Here we are.
delighted.
Yeah, I love this topic. Is Rich Dad Poor Dad still relevant today? So when was it published? How long ago did Robert Kiyosaki write
Originally published 1997. So yeah, and a lot of the stories I think in it are, talk about him growing up in the 60s and the 70s. So I think a lot of people might read it and go, well, how relevant is a book about investing in the 60s and 70s and published 1997? How relevant is that today? Can it still be relevant?
Yeah, in a fast-paced world that we live in, can it possibly give us any tips or tricks on how to actually invest in property? Well, the short answer is yes. I think it's very, very relevant. There are elements within that book that I still follow in our business today, and constantly going back to and referring to, and believe that it is absolutely relevant. I have to make a confession though, that actually this isn't my favorite book of Robert Kiyosaki's, and the very first one that I read was Increase Your Financial IQ.
Let's maybe tell that story. I think that's a good story. So for those people that do know us, they'll know some of this story. Others might not. So going back to when was it? That must have been going back to about 2008.
2008, yeah.
2008 is when we started, having come from a corporate background in financial recruitment. We set up our own lifestyle recruitment business just as the 2008 recession hit. So great timing, awesome. So that kind of wiped us out. At the time, we were recruiting for accountants, and we were often traveling overseas and recruiting candidates from the Far East who would then be placed into roles within Europe. And we were out in Malaysia, I believe, Kuala Lumpur at the time, weren't we?
Yeah, we were at a recruitment fair in KL, and at that point we did have 7 buy-to-lets, right? And we'd, between us, over 10 years, got those 7 buy-to-lets by doing it the way that we thought you needed to buy property, which was work hard, save for a deposit, buy a property, and then start saving for the next one. So between us, 10 years, 7 properties, we actually thought we were doing pretty well, because that was more than, say, any of our peers, friends, colleagues, family had at that point. So we thought, check us out. We've got our own business. We've got 7 buy-to-lets. We're doing well. And then when our income literally stopped overnight, we thought, hang on a minute, we've got to do something different. And we weren't that passionate about recruitment. It was a means to making money. And I guess for a lot of our listeners, they're probably making money on a monthly basis without being that passionate about their job. I mean, they'll be good at it, and they've monetized their skills and their time to a certain level, but they won't really be bouncing out of bed and going, yes, can't wait to get into my job today. So when we were in Malaysia, we invested money we didn't have, because I'd read Richard Branson's book, Losing My Virginity, and he talked about expanding your way out of trouble. So when a business is starting to fail, you should actually get deeper into that failure and get even more uncomfortable before you can actually bounce out of it, which went against everything instinctively that we were feeling. We were trying to cut all costs and trying to increase the money coming in. But we invested money to go out to Malaysia, and it didn't really pan out the way we thought it was going to pan out. And it was while we were having some downtime that you said, hey, have you read this book, Increase Your Financial IQ by Robert Kiyosaki?
Well, I'm going to give a little bit extra backstory there. So I have to confess that I read this book, the original one, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I first picked that up probably 2001, 2002, because I was in my previous life job in recruitment and hating it and wanting a way out. And I'd always had this bug around property ever since I was at university, and I did the maths on what my landlord was making in our student house, right? So, from those days, I was like, you know, it's got to work, right? I've got to be able to do it. So I did read this book, and there were some real light bulb moments in there. I just loved it, and it really did change my mindset. But I got sucked back into kind of working for another 5 years, and it was only, or more than that, 7 years. And it was only when we were out there I kind of revisited it, and we talked about property quite a lot as maybe being our way out, and we were both quite passionate about property.
Yeah.
And I said, right, I read this book, a few years ago. It's never kind of left me. It's always been in the back of my brain. Have you read it? And you said, no, you hadn't read it. And you didn't really read books at that time. It
Yeah.
wasn't really a
I,
thing. So,
I, yeah. I
so I
wasn't.
remember saying, right, well, I'm going to go get it. So I remember jumping in a cab, getting into town, finding a bookstore, went into the bookstore and tried to find this book. And they didn't have this one, but they did have the kind of follow up to it, which was
Yeah.
called Increase Your Financial IQ, which is kind of for those of you that know Rich Dad Poor Dad, there's lots and lots of stories in this one. The principles are all there, but the financial IQ one was a bit more punchy. It was a bit fewer stories,
Yeah.
more just cut into the nuts and bolts of it. So
Yeah.
I bought that one and a couple of other ones. In fact, we talked about this before we came on, that we might actually do an episode just on books, because I
Yeah.
think there's so much there.
Maybe once a month, do a book that's influenced or changed
Yeah.
our business and how we do things.
But I think everything comes back to this one and the financial IQ. So I got that one, and I gave it to you to read. And I've never seen you at that time just sit and devour a book, and you did. And I remember you kind of closing the book and went, "We're doing this."
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, if he's buying apartment blocks in Arizona with no money and we have no money, then how do we do this in Edinburgh? How do we do this in the UK? And we're like, right. And actually, you bought a blank journal, just a blank notebook. And I remember sitting in a pub going, okay, we have 7 properties. How do we get to 10? Because that just buying another 3 when we were like absolutely stony broke just seemed a massive mountain for us to climb. So we thought, yeah, let's get to 10. That will be amazing if we can do that. Right. Who do we know that does it? What do we need to do when we get back to the UK? And we were absolutely clear that we needed a mentor, that we needed somebody that had already done it to show us, because the way we'd been doing it for the last 10 years was getting us nowhere very quickly. On the surface, 7 buy-to-let sounds great, but when you can't buy your food on a monthly basis, that doesn't really help you much. And that's really where the whole journey and learning this system that we followed and that now we teach other people all began. So there's some key points in this book that I think would be really useful for our listeners for us to highlight if they're not familiar with the book, or if they
Yeah.
read it a while ago, that we can maybe revisit just
Yeah.
to show how relevant it is today. If you are loving what you're hearing on this Property Life podcast, you can join us for a free training that will give you a 7-step process, a roadmap on how to start and scale a property investment business. This 7th step of the process is the most surprising of all. It really shakes people when they learn that 7th and final step. You will also get some live case studies of deals our students are working on right now for training that's worth over £1,000. You can access that free by clicking the link in the show notes to access that 1 hour of content today.
Yeah, if I go back to the very beginning, right, when I read the bit that got me, I'm just going to hold up this chapter because,
Well, that's no use if no one's on YouTube right
well, if you're not on YouTube, come see us on YouTube. We are there. This Property Life, you'll find us on YouTube channel. But what I'm holding up is a page of the one that grabbed me all those years ago that said, it was lesson 5. Lesson 5, the rich invent money. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
How can you invent money and create money? And, I read this chapter and it was all about being able to buy properties below value, add value. And then in this example you initially used is sell them and make money from never having, even owned it, essentially.
Yeah.
And that was just absolutely mind blowing. I was like, why are we not taught? Why are we not taught this stuff? you know. And if you talk to people outside of property, they'll be like, oh, you can't, how can you invent money? How can you create
Yeah.
money?
Yeah.
It seems so fantastical as to
Yeah.
be, this whole too good to be true phrase that you hear quite a lot.
Yeah, and when I say you do not need money to invest in property, people look at you as if you're a bit batshit crazy. Um, and then there's a whole world of cynicism that comes behind that. In fact, I faced it the other day when one of our students who'd attended one of my workshops like recommended it on a particular forum on Facebook, and the amount of comments that followed, just someone who had, I've experienced this, I thought it was great, if you guys are looking for alternatives, this would be a great thing for you to experience. The comments went along the lines of, be careful, it's a pyramid scheme, it's a scam, if they're so good at property, why are they teaching it? And I was like, really
Oh, I love that one.
blown away. Really blown away by the cynicism behind, if someone is good at something, why on earth would they give it away and tell other people how to do it? And I thought, well, let's put that into a different scenario rather than property investing. If I was an amazing hairdresser and I had mastered my art in cutting people's hair and coloring people's hair and styling people's hair, if I suddenly started a hairdressing school, would people go, oh, well, she can't be that good at hairdressing then if she's having to set up a school? They wouldn't. And I think it comes from a place of absolute fear and disbelief that someone that has made money would actually show other people how they can make money. Because as Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki talks about in his books, is you come from a place of abundance where none of our students are going to be competition to us. I'm not competition to them. You can make as much money as you want to out there, which again sounds crazy, like you said when you read that lesson, that chapter. And it's just a whole new way of thinking and operating in a world where you didn't really think existed. It's a bit like that matrix where you take the red pill or the blue pill or whatever, right? Um, it's a parallel universe that exists, and you have to kind of go down the rabbit warren to find all the different avenues that it can lead to. And it's really exciting, but it is different to what everyone else is doing. And as human beings, we like familiarity and comfort, and to see what everyone else is doing first before we then make decisions on what we do ourselves. It's a fundamental in human behavior, and that like blows my mind every time you have someone who's skeptical or doubts what you don't need money to invest in property. That can't be right. Well,
It's
when
just
they're kids, they've been programmed that in order to get that Nintendo game, they need to do all their chores, do all the work before they get their pocket money that they then have to save up before they then get the Nintendo game. So if you're programmed like that from a very young age, it just stands to reason that you expect that to be like everything else in life.
it's just old thinking. And to be honest, if I'm being really brutal about it, it's lazy. It's lazy thinking, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just too easy to say, oh, oh, that can't work because why should it? That can't work 'cause it sounds too good to be true. It's like, well, have you actually read into it? Have you looked into it?
Yeah.
Have you studied it? Have you questioned it? Where's all that? Where's it coming from? It
It means
drives me mad. That whole kind of, if they're so good, why are they teaching it? Drives me mad because it's like, well, how many books has Richard Branson written? Does he
yeah.
need the money from books? Probably not, right?
Yeah.
But he's
Yeah.
writing books. Why? Because somebody might take something from that and make a success of themselves from it.
Right. Richard Branson has taught me personally so much. Model successful people. Find people who've done exactly what you want to do, model them, copy them, do it. It's really simple. But again, people are like, oh, there's got to be a catch. There's got to be something going on there. But every single entrepreneur's book says the same thing. It's the
Same.
same formula. Have a really strong reason on why you want to do it. Find someone that can help you do it. Learn how to do it, master it, and do it.
And then work your ass off, and maybe you'll be successful. It's like it's not rocket science. But let's delve into this thing because I want to talk some of the kind of real nuts and bolts about this book and what we took from it
Yeah.
individually and together. Um, because as I said, it stuck with me, and I didn't actually take the action on it till a few years later.
It took a
Um,
woman to take that
yeah,
information and do something with it.
well,
There we
yeah,
are, ladies.
it was a circumstance for sure, and I do like to think I would have ultimately got there, but it took revisiting it for sure to actually look at it and go, you know what? Now the need is there,
Yeah.
and we now need to do this because if we don't do this, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
So the whole kind of for me again, for those of you not on YouTube, do recommend you coming and watching us on YouTube, because I'm going to hold up this one, and then Caroline's got something she's going to share. It was this diagram for
Yeah.
me, which was for those of you that know the book, is where he talks about the income statement and the balance sheet,
Yeah.
which, I would say to a lot of people out there, wouldn't know what an income statement or balance sheet really is, what it looks
Yeah.
like. And I think it sounds a bit scary in accounting, and
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
a business, balance sheet might be a bit intimidating to look at if you're not accountancy trained. But when you look at your personal one, and anyone that's got into property full time and doing maybe commercial knows about producing income and expenditure statements and assets and liabilities. But what Robert Kiyosaki did in this book was really boil it down to the difference between somebody with one income stream, which is a job, and spending, and then an entrepreneurial mindset, seeing how assets provide the income, and then you spend what the assets provide, and your actual earned income goes into building assets. It's like building an extra step, and that again, I had to read that chapter a few times before it really sunk in. But that was the thing it was the bug in my head that I couldn't, get rid of. That eventually resurfaced 7 years later around a poolside in Kuala
Yeah.
Lumpur.
Yeah. I mean, I like, well, when I heard financial statement, yeah, that did put the fear into me, because I didn't know what a financial statement was. I mean, there we were having our own recruitment business, the recession killing it, and me thinking, what's a financial statement? I mean, that sounds mental in itself, that we had that business and didn't really know anything about financials. We just knew how to place people in jobs and then invoice for it. But the whole idea of that financial statement just being broken up into 4 boxes. Do you want me to share the
Yeah, why don't
screen?
you do a
For
screen
those of
share?
you on YouTube, you'll be able to see the um the image that I'm about to share. Well, I'm hoping. There we are. You can see here that you have the income box, the expenses box, the asset box, and the liabilities box. And depending on where you behave with money, the flow of money will be different for different mentalities. So if you have the poor mindset behind money, whatever comes in goes out. So
So that's
that
the
can
red
have,
line there on the screen for everyone who is
yeah.
on
So
YouTube. If you're
if
not,
you're
you just
on,
have to imagine it. Um,
but the poor mentality has the money going into the income box and then over to the expenses box and then out the door.
yeah.
Then you have
An
the middle class.
example of that would be the very first commission check I got for my job in recruitment. So I was very excited. Got my first commission check, which was just over £1,000. This is back in 1997.
Ooh, big
What did I
bucks.
do with that £1,000? Did I put it in my bank account and wait for the next one and then go and put a deposit on a house? Or did I go down to the local hi-fi shop and buy a Sony hi-fi for about just under £1,000? Which one do you think I did?
Was that with a tape deck?
It had a twin tape deck
Oh,
and
wow.
a MIDI system. It was
Woo.
awesome,
Yeah.
but it was probably worth about 10% of what I paid for it as soon as I walked it out the door and set up at home.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
loved it. But that was a poor mindset.
That
Like,
was a
wow, I've got
very,
some money in, great, I earned that. Let's go spend it. Let's go
yeah.
and buy something cool.
Yeah. Well, cool to you. Right.
Mm.
So the poor mentality, money in, money out, right? Then you've got the middle class mentality, which is the keeping up with the Joneses. The money comes into the income box. Then it goes right down into your liabilities box in the form of your mortgage, your car payments, the kids' school fees, the being a member of the golf club and going on the nice swishy holidays and buying the designer shoes and handbags. That's the bunch of liabilities down there. So then that equates to the expenses that you have, and then your money goes out that the door there. So even when you look at from the outside, looking at the middle class mentality, they've got the house, they've got the cars, they're going on the nice holidays, they're wearing all the bling bling. They look like they're winning in life. But actually, if you compare that to the poor mentality, it's the middle class mentality that are at most risk. Because if their income stops, then actually they've got a bunch of liabilities they need to service. Unlike the poor mentality, where, well, whatever goes in goes out. And if it doesn't come in, then I don't have anything to spend it on, right? So that middle class mentality is a very, very vulnerable place for you to be financially on a monthly basis. But unfortunately for the middle class, they don't know that until something happens, like a redundancy or a recession, and their bonus gets cut, or the government comes in and changes tax legislation, which means they have to pay VAT on school fees or whatever, right?
And just to be clear on this, when we're using these terms, poor, middle class, wealthy, we're talking. These are the terms that Robert Kiyosaki used in his book.
Yeah,
So don't read too much into what we're saying there. This is literally the terminology out of the book, just to give you an indication. It's just, rather than thinking of someone as middle class, it's the mindset, and it's
yeah.
just a label for the mindset essentially.
Well, do you know what? I think that mindset as a word is used quite a lot and it's not very clear what it means. But actually, I've now been using the word attitude. So, your attitude to money and how you then behave around that money will make you either in the poor category, the middle class category, or the wealthy category. So, yeah, if you're not clear on what mindset is, it's not about being positive all the time. It's just about your attitude and behaviors. Then, of course, you've got the wealthy attitude or mindset to money, and that's whatever money comes in. And this is the big shift in change of behavior. Rather than um, paying your mortgage and having all your expenses, what you actually do is put it into your asset column. And it's the income from your assets that actually pays for all the bling bling down in the liability column. And your money goes out the door that way. So this gives you a degree of protection, security, that if the income stops, the liabilities are still serviced by the assets. But while that sounds fantastic, it means that you might need to sacrifice getting all the bling bling for a while you build up those income generating assets. So, this for me, I'm going to stop sharing now, is the diagram and the flow of cash and your attitude and behavior around money that really changed everything for me. Because there I was, needing to place a candidate in a job to invoice to then get paid for me to then pay my living expenses. And everyone who's in a job, Robert Robert Kiyosaki says job stands for just over broke. It is literally paycheck to paycheck. They're roughly spending around 10% more than their paycheck, climbing that ladder, trying to get that pay increase to then cover that extra 10% that they're paying or spending. And that keeps them in what he calls the rat race or the hamster wheel, as I call it. Um, so the minute that the penny dropped on that for me, I'm like, okay, what are the income generating assets? Now, he talks about property, but I started thinking of as many different income generating assets that I could potentially access or invest in that would maybe diversify our income and have that multiple streams of income into your household. So I often say to my students, think about your household as a business. You might have a couple both going out and working hard in their jobs and they're bringing home two paychecks. So you have two income streams, but they're both active. You need to be exchanging one of your most valuable commodities, which is your time and your knowledge and skill, to then get paid every single month. If you can just use some of that income to transition over into a passive income stream, then suddenly the need and the pressure of having that active source of income suddenly wanes. And when you find that people are needing to go to that job on a day to day basis because they have all these commitments in their lives, suddenly the joy and the fun um, is not it's just not there anymore. And I think that's why we're seeing this mental health crisis around the world, is people, having followed that mentality that their parents taught them, which is go to school, get the best grades possible, go and get some higher education to get higher the education, the better the job.
Well, I think that is definitely what our parents' generation
Yeah.
taught,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
So
it's work.
we're Generation X, right? So the Boomer generation, our parents. Well, basically, I think a lot of people call them like the fortunate generation or whatever, but I just think that they were the anomaly, really.
Yeah.
And so if you look back through history, they were in the anomaly where things worked for them. Dad had he worked for the same employer for like 40 odd years. You could get a good job in a good organization, work your way up, and retire on a nice golden pension. That was the norm. That kind
Yeah.
of worked,
Yeah.
right? But it only worked for that generation. Didn't work for us. Didn't work for
Yeah.
our generation. And I think future generations are seeing that actually, the children of Generation X's and millennials now are now saying actually that's not the same. And I think that's why you're seeing such this generational shift in attitudes to work
Yep.
with the younger generations. They're not seeing that their parents had this thing that worked, which was get good grades, go to university,
Yeah.
get a good job in a good employer, work there, work your way up, retire on a nice fat pension. That didn't work for many of our generation. So I think younger generations are saying, well, actually, we are digressing a little bit, but why should I do that?
Yep.
Surely there's other options. And I think
Yep.
what we teach a lot is those multiple income streams and looking at what your skill sets are and how you can monetize those skill sets. And we do a lot of work with our students. And I do when I'm out mentoring is that we're always talking about earned and unearned income streams.
Yep.
Um, but the bedrock of all of it is you got to own stuff. You got to own assets.
Yep.
Because if Robert Kiyosaki in his books talk a lot about the middle classes being squeezed, and a lot of what he said back in 1997 and in every book, which basically repeats the same thing since, um, is kind of what it kind of is playing out.
Yeah, he's kind of predicted the future, and he's been right every step of the way. Um, having worked closely with the Rich Dad, the organization,
we
and
actually
Robert
ended up
Kiyosaki.
teaching Robert Kiyosaki's courses and stuff out all over the world, didn't you?
Yeah, so I was invited to train a Rich Dad workshop, and it was really there that my instinct initially was, I can't do that. I don't know if I want to do that, and I lost a lot of weight through nerves, that's for sure. But then when I got into it, I really loved it because I realized that actually public speaking, the fear of public speaking is the fear of making a fool of yourself or the fear of someone trying to catch you out. And I was like, well, I know this information inside out and backwards and upside down. And so, but I became his like number one global trainer, traveling everywhere for well over a decade. Um, I love the material. As a person, like there's some things he's got going on that I don't agree with. That's another story. But his guns and his big game hunting and stuff like that, I don't like.
Yeah, I mean,
And
you don't have to agree with him as a person to
yeah, and
accept
this is
that some of his teachings are really relevant and
this is
really
it.
work.
I think that we're far too quick to judge. And with social media now, you're like, if you take an instant dislike to someone, you just stop listening to the words that they're saying or the message that they have. I value and I'm super grateful to the books that he published because it wouldn't have changed our paths the way that it did. And I think what's fundamental behind all of his teaching is, I'm going to come back to again, that abundance, that he could write this global phenomenon book and it's been translated into countless languages around the world. You say Robert Kiyosaki in any country, people get it. And then the whole point of that Rich Dad Poor Dad book was actually not about the book. It was about him promoting a game that he was super passionate about. The game was the educational tool, the game's Cashflow 101. And the book was so successful, everyone just ignored the game and were like, whatever, not interested in the game. I love the book. So he kind of, what he set out to achieve kind of took a bit of a different path, which I like because that's real life. That happens with everyone. But we did play the game. And I know that you can play it digitally, but I'm still a bit old fashioned where the board game has so many lessons in it.
I
Um,
yeah, I mean, we talked about this as well. The difference between Monopoly and there's two basically, well-known games around real estate.
yeah.
Monopoly by far, obviously the most well-known, but Cashflow's there as well. And the thing about Monopoly is it is a zero-sum game. You have to you win by everyone else losing, right? You have to beat everyone else into bankruptcy.
Yeah,
It's
you
kind of
have to
gives.
literally destroy your
Yeah.
opposition to
And this
win.
and I think this is what, I've definitely contributed to, this perception of landlords as being kind of evil, right? The top-hatted, cane wielding landlords strolling around, the dirty streets, evicting people out of their slum tenements. That's kind of, I think, a lot what, really contributed to that. Um, And what we love about the Cashflow 101 game is everyone can win.
Yeah. Like you can all get out the rat race. You're against yourself. And in life, that is exactly the same, right? I know as human beings, we love to compare ourselves, and social media has amplified that by 1,000,000%. But um, it's whatever your occupation is, the card that you're dealt, you then have to get out of the rat race by being in the rat race and then making investment decisions. And I think every decision you make either puts you closer to your goal or takes you further away from your goal. And as human beings living their lives, and our listeners here today or watching us on YouTube, every decision you make on a daily basis takes you closer or further away from any goal you set yourself. And actually, that leads me on to my second favorite book, which we can maybe cover next time, which is The Slight Edge. But anyway,
Yeah, no, that's a
right.
whole book in itself, Slight Edge, I think. We'll
Well, yes,
definitely
it is. It's
come
another
on to
book in
that.
itself.
As in,
Episode.
sorry, an episode. That's a whole episode in itself for that book.
Join us for our 3-day property intensive workshop. This is world renowned. This is the program I took global for Rich Dad Education and Robert Kiyosaki. This 3-day intensive workshop will go through a step-by-step process on how you are going to choose the correct strategy for your life, your circumstances. We'll go through the pros and cons of each of these strategies, and then we'll show you how to actually pinpoint your investment area, how to find the deals in that investment area, as well as how to do the deal analysis. That deal analysis saves you from making any expensive mistakes in the property market. We'll show you how to raise the money. There are more than 40 different ways of raising money to structure your deals in a creative way. We'll show you how to make lump sums of cash as well as residual monthly income. We'll also look deep into the whole psychology and how you can use debt to create generational wealth. We'll go into multi-million pound transactions as well as the little baby buy-to-lets at the start, and we'll show you how to actually create that wealth plan for the future so that your generations to come can benefit from the work you put in today. When you secure your ticket to the next 3-day intensive property workshop, you will also qualify for our bonus material. We have a learning platform with over 20 videos and downloadable documents to get you started and prepared for attending the workshop. In those videos, whenever they're updated, you will get access to that content. We will also make sure on the workshop that you get a one-to-one consultation with a property investor so that you can have a bespoke strategy specific to your life so that you can hit the ground running after the workshop. We don't want you to attend course after course after course. We want you to get results now. To secure your place in our world-renowned 5-star rated sellout property workshop, click the link in the show notes to secure your spot now. Spaces fill up quickly, so don't delay.
But yeah, what I like about the Cashflow game is that it's interesting when you play it. Initially when you get dealt the card, you get dealt out. For those who don't know, you get dealt out cards that tell you what your profession is, right?
Yeah.
And you could be a doctor, or you could be like a street sweeper or something, right? And you see people, when they get the doctor card, they're like, "Yeah, I'm a doctor," and you go, "Ah, no,
Nah, that's bad, man.
that's the hardest card to get dealt."
No, it's airline pilot. Airline pilot is the worst, right? But when you get it, you're like, look how much money I get every month. Yes. Actually, you want to be the janitor.
Yeah, because
Heads
then
up.
it's easier to escape the rat race on a lower salary, and this is, I think, one of those kind of mindset shifts that students have undergone when they see that, and they're like, well, hang on, it goes against everything you ever taught,
Yeah.
right? And when I get people that I coach and mentor, is somebody that's, you say, well, I'm on a low income, so I know this is going to be really difficult. And I'm, no, you're actually that's a completely wrong way of thinking about it. It's going to be easier for you. I
Yeah.
mean, easier in one sense, not in another sense, but look, it is actually easier to create an asset base that covers your outgoings if you're on a lower income than if you're on a higher income,
Yeah.
right? Um,
The,
and
the
that is a
guys on the
mega
big, yeah.
mindset shift for people.
The guys on the big salaries that we've worked with over the years, um, they're time poor, right? And time is one of your most valuable commodities. You need to, in fact, I was just putting together an Instagram post on this about your 3 most valuable commodities: time, education, and money. And in order to get more of one, you have to invest the other 2. So, there's got to be a bit of a balance in what resources you have for you to then hustle and get improvements on what you need more of: time, money, education,
Yeah.
knowledge.
So what are the key takeaways then still that are relevant from this book?
Well, he at the back he has a chapter called Getting Started, and it has 10 points in it. I love the 10 points because they're super succinct and easy. I hate that word easy.
No, I don't
Simple.
like easy as well. But actually,
Yeah.
just to be talking about that, I've just flicked over to page and it just opened at random, honestly. And I've seen a bit that I highlighted. I must have highlighted this years ago. It says, invest first in education. In reality, the only real asset you have is your mind, the most powerful tool we have dominion over. Each
Yeah.
of us has a choice of what we put in our brain once we're old enough. You can watch TV, read golf magazines, go to ceramics class or a class on financial planning. You choose.
Yeah.
Most people simply buy investments rather than first investing in learning about investing.
Yeah.
Wow.
This
Okay, I like
this
that.
yeah, that's the making choices again, that decisions, make daily choices. Um since getting started with this whole rich dad, poor dad, investing in property, I have not read one trashy magazine because that's just time taken away from maybe learning a new skill. The biggest shift for me in my attitude is being like an open book to learning anything and being absolutely comfortable with saying I don't know that. Um, and that gain on knowledge and someone sharing a piece of information with you, once you have that information, it can't be taken away from you. So think about every little nugget of information that you get, every connection in the network around you that is investing in property is a connection that can help you. It's not about just, taking, which is why we do what we do, because we know that the more we help other people, the more other people will help us. That's just how this works. We're constantly seeking people out there that can teach us more
Yeah,
because you don't know what you don't know. It's one of my favorite sayings. You
yeah.
don't know what you don't
What
know.
you put out there, you get back. So if
Yeah.
you put it out there and you help other people, then you'll get other people to help you.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Interesting. One of the things I thought of on this bit, talking to a lot of people over the years wanting to get into property, and I mention this book and I say, look, this is prerequisite. Go read this or the Financial IQ one to get your head in the right place. And one of the negatives I get back on this book is, oh yeah, but it doesn't tell you how to actually do it. It just goes into the mindset stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, yeah, but, what he did in 1973 is not relevant for investing in Burnley in 2025,
Yeah.
right? Because it's different. But the principles
Yeah.
and the attitude or mindset is what's important. Because if you
100.
have that, you can go and find out how you're going to invest in Burnley in 2025.
Yeah. Your net worth is your network. The more that you hang around with people who are doing what you want to do, that power of association. Um, those 10 points. I mean, it's about. I mean, I could read them all not out now, but I won't. It's the number one. I think is the underlying pin for everything, and that is find a reason greater than reality, the power of your spirit. If you have a strong reason to want to make a change, if you have a strong reason to build an income generating asset base for your life, then you will find a way to do it. It's about that fire in the belly, the attitude. And number one is, if you ask most people if they'd like to be rich or financially free, they'd say yes. But then reality sets in. Oh, they might need to pay to get some information to learn how to do it. Or they might need to invest some time that they feel they don't have in order to go to their investment area and view properties. They might need to get resilient to having offers turned down. They might need to get a little bit resourceful in trying to raise some money, right? So the reality sets in. The road just seems too long with too many hills to climb. It's just easier to work for money. That's it, right? It's that
It's
fire
not
in the
it's not
belly.
easier if your company goes out of business,
Well,
makes you
yeah.
redundant. It's not easier then, is it? But
Yeah. It's all about the need and the desire.
yeah,
And then that gives you the whole purpose behind it. And that's the jet fuel that keeps that fire burning, which then really takes all that pride that you think you might have about asking for help. So I think, again, our kids' education system is in a place where they don't want to get things wrong, right? They don't want to fail. They don't want to ask for help. I think we need to lose that. And one of the biggest fears we're always dealing with our students is that fear of failure. Well, what is failure? Not trying is failure in my head,
Yeah.
or giving up is failure, right?
Yeah. I mean,
So,
I thought about this. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was talking about this failure, success. What is the opposite of success? A lot of people would say failure, and it's not. The opposite of success is not trying,
yeah.
right? Because if you're trying, you will be failing. You can't be successful unless you've failed along the way. We've failed loads of times. I mean, God,
Yeah.
how many things
And
we failed at, like getting to where we are. But the opposite of success is not failure. It is not doing anything at all.
yeah. Or
Um,
carrying, just accepting the status quo and just carrying on.
yeah,
And people are just existing, and they need to start waking up and going, look, no one's coming to rescue you. There's a lot of turmoil coming in the marketplace. You just need to, well, the headline.
Sir Keir isn't going to rescue you.
Yes, Sir Keir is out to make misery a reality,
Yeah,
and then he's going to blame the Tories for creating that
he's going to blame
misery.
landlords. He's going to blame.
Yeah, well, blame anyone but, him. Um, and all that turmoil and upset, we're just going to quietly keep our heads down and just keep buying, just keep doing what we're doing, right? We can't control what the government's going to do. We can't control what the property market's going to do. We can't control what the banks are going to do. But if you have a really strong knowledge base on how to make money in any condition, regardless of the resources, then actually none of that stuff matters. So block out the noise and just keep going.
And go and learn how to create money.
There we
That's it.
are.
There we
Robert
are. That's what.
Kiyosaki.
Yeah. So, Rich Dad Pod Ad, relevant or not?
Relevant.
Highly relevant. Highly
Highly
relevant
relevant.
still. You can pretty much pick up any one of his books and it'll say the same thing, but the one I would definitely recommend is either the original one, or if you can get hold of it, increase your financial IQ, which is a bit more, I think, practical.
Yeah. And get a blank journal, write in there what you're trying to achieve, then start taking actions every week towards it. It doesn't even need to be massive actions, just small actions. Just speak to two people a week about what it
Yeah.
is that you want to do, and see if they can give you some information and help about it.
Here's an action. Go onto our This Property Life website and ask us a question. Something you
Yes.
want us to cover in upcoming episodes. We are here to help and answer questions. Ask us anything. Mail in, and we'll try and cover as many of those questions as we can over the next few weeks. So, what's coming up next, Caroline, for
We
This
have a
Property Life
very
and Property Wealth System?
Probably, yeah, we've got a really busy time. I mean, there's only 4 months left of the year, but we have rammed it full of events that are going to keep us out of trouble. And we've got, obviously, our podcast episodes that will be coming out weekly. We're going to continue with that and launching our YouTube channel, which you guys are all going to now tune in to see our lovely diagrams. But I am holding the first Scottish event, my first Scottish-based workshop in 5 years in Edinburgh on the 11th, 12th, and 13th of October. So I don't know if I'm going to do another one in Scotland, but for my Scottish peeps, I want to make it a really relevant workshop for you guys at the Village Hotel. So in order to secure your space there, and spaces are going quick, you need to get over to our website, Property Wealth System, and secure your spot on that. So that's October. We are going to be down in London in November I've been invited to speak, be a keynote speaker, and do a ton of masterclasses live in person at the XL in London in mid-November. First weekend of December, where I'm going to be back down in London again doing a workshop. And in between, we've got networking events for our existing students that we are continually working with. So we've got an amazing little community. Everyone is helping each other out and celebrating everyone's successes and holding each other up when you have a disappointment, which is why we love being at the forefront of this community and podcast that we have here.
Fantastic. So lots and lots going on. We've got some great episodes coming up. I believe that you're guesting on another podcast this week.
Yes, I'm being interviewed on Wednesday, so that will be on my social media. So check out my Instagram, carolineclayton.property. There's lots of little bits and going on there. And we have got another hotel that we are going to be developing, and spades go in the ground as of the 30th of September. It hasn't been without its trials and tribulations, believe me. Lots of swearing and teeth grinding around that one. So as we progress with that, again, it will be on our socials, it will be on our podcast. So stay very close to the fire so that we can keep you warm in these cold, wintry nights that are
Except
due to come.
we're recording this on September the 2nd, and it's pretty much winter already in Scotland.
Get used to
So
it. It's going to be another 9 months of
settle
it.
in for the next 9 months. Awesome. Great. And on that note, great to have you back on the podcast, Caroline. Looking forward to all the stuff that's coming up. Stay tuned for latest episodes over the next few weeks. We've got some really exciting content coming up for you, and we shall see you all soon.
Take care. Remember to click the link in the show notes for you to access a free online 1-hour training special that's worth over £1,000 to start and scale your property business today. Click the link in the show notes to watch.